I did what I said, right? I did it how I did it, right? Yeah, cause I'm confident. I think I need an armor on me. Yeah, just me, no army with me. Stay blessed, got the Father with me. That's why your nose in my business, right? So damn nosy. All these bitches know.
Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am DripInJoy. I make wigs, I do installs, I specialize in glueless wigs. So let's go ahead and get into this video. So today in this video, I'm going to give you 3 major tips on how to go ahead and create a glueless look with your bundles and your closure. Today we will be doing a 5x5 closure with 3 bundles. The texture of the hair is body wave. For this part here, if you guys want to know exactly how to put on a closure, there is a previous video that I do have on how to go ahead and make sure your closure is put on correctly and it's in the middle, and you get that nice finished look. So go ahead and check out my old video. But in this video, we're just going to focus on the tip on how to go ahead and create a glueless wig. So y'all stay tuned. And if you're not yet a subscriber, I hope by the end of this video you become a subscriber. So don't forget to follow your girl for some more tips and for some more videos on glueless wigs, installs, and just wigs, period. What happened? Alright, so once you're done sewing in your closure, this is how your closure should look. It should look like it's in the middle. I have not bleached it yet, so please don't mind it, but we'll bleach it after. So let's go ahead and get into these tips. Make sure, again, you subscribe by the end of this video because we truly appreciate your support. So, tip number 1, cap size is definitely important. Like, if you don't have your customer exact measurements of the head, you want to determine if their head is between a circumference of 21 to 22, 22 to 23, 23 to 24. Most of the time, average people's head does range from 21 to 23. So you will be making cap size around that range of circumference. But cap size is definitely important. If you don't have a cap that fits your client head, that can cause a lot of trouble. It could be either that the cap is way too big, and if they turn their head, even swing their head to the side, the wig is going to come off. Or the cap could be really too small to the point where it's not fitting your client head. So this is the reason why knowing your client's size of their head is very, very important. It does determine if that wig is going to sit correctly on their head or not. Also, the type of cap that you use can also determine if the client head will have enough air to breathe. I like to get caps with holes in it. I don't like those secured cap with no holes in it because therefore the client is going to be too hot. Even if they're in a cold room, they're going to be too hot. So be careful on what type of caps you're buying as well, because that's very, very important on the type of caps that you're getting to make your wigs on. There is some things that I do want to point out as you're sewing on the cap as well. In a second, you will see the band right there. You don't want to sew on that. You want to sew on this right here. You see where the arrow, that little cap size, even though it's hanging on the side, you still want to be able to sew on it. Because if you sew on the band, that band is not going to be able to stretch. So what? It's a little thin little net right there. It's there for you to sew on so that you don't sew on the band. So be sure that you are sewing on that part and not the band itself, because that could determine on how the caps sit on your client head as well. Also, if you sew on the band, it can definitely change your client cap size. So if you had a cap that was a small, which is a 22 circumference or a 21 circumference, if you're sewing on that band, it can literally shrink the cap to like maybe a 19, 20 circumference. Yes, it could shrink it by inches. So please do be careful to not sew on that band, because it can cause a lot of troubles. I'm telling you, a lot of troubles with your cap. I would recommend that you do use a measuring tape so that you can know at least the circumference of your client's head, so you can know what caps to sew on. If you're not making like a cap or a wig just for that client mode head, you want to at least know their circumference so that you can buy a cap that's within that circumference. Because if you don't, you're just going to be playing a guessing game, and you don't want to play the guessing game because that cap could either be too small or too big for your client's head. So getting that at least the circumference of the client's head definitely matters. Definitely matters. Okay, let's get into step 2. So step 2, your sewing must be secure. This is very important. As you're sewing in, you want to make sure that your sewing knots, that is secured. You do not want to have a loose sewing. Like a loose sewing, especially with these cotton threads, can definitely cause a lot of unraveling very quick. If you're not securing knots throughout the sewing, it can definitely make your wig last maybe like a month before you will have to retouch it up. So if you want to make sure like your wigs last maybe like a year, you want to make sure you're securing knots throughout the sewing, and it has to be knots. Notice that I said secured and not tight, because it's a difference between having something being secured and having something to be tight. You don't want to sew the cap too tight, because therefore that can also change the size of your cap. So you want to make sure that you're securing knots and not actually tying the knots tight, if that makes sense to you guys. So a way how I get my knot secure, I will go through the track itself. Before I pull it all the way, I will make sure I tie the thread around the needle maybe 2 times, and then I will pull it. And as I'm pulling it, I will make sure that I'm holding the track so that I can control the tension of how tight it's going to be on the cap. So by holding the track as you're pulling, it controls how tight you want that knot to be. I also like to tuggle on the cap itself just to make sure that it's still giving me that stretchy feeling, because you can tell if it's too tight. When you're pulling the cap itself, you're going to see the tension while you're pulling it. The less tension it gives, the better it is, because that means that cap, once you're done sewing all your tracks, that cap will still be able to stretch. You also want to make sure that when you're sewing, you're not sewing too far away from each other. You're sewing maybe like a little space in between. You don't want to sew too close, and you don't want to sew too far from each other. So you still want to allow it to have that little space. So therefore, the cap will be able to stretch with the tracks, if that makes sense to you guys as well. So what I'm basically trying to say is that the tracks will stretch with the cap. Alrighty, let's get into tip 3. Tip 3 is to properly lay your tracks down. This is very important because it definitely does determine the style of your hair. That is so beautiful, so neat. But the way how you lay your tracks down is very, very, very important. It's very important because if you're not knowing how to sew in a particular style, or maybe glue in a particular style, it can really throw off the hairstyle of how the hairstyle is going to look, how it's supposed to fall, how everything is just going to be like a whole big mess, and you're going to have to create a whole different style. So this particular style that I'm doing today is a split in the middle, or you can either do it on the side, the way how I'm sewing it in. With a 5x5 closure, it does allow that space to be able to do either a side part or either a middle part. So today we are doing a middle part, and I do want to be able to switch the style for this glueless wig. So the way how I'm sewing it, I am sewing the tracks straight, in a straight line. I'm not even curving the tops. I wanted to give it that nice kind of sharp bob look where it's going to fall straight down on the sides. It's very important to know that. It's very important to know when to curve the tracks or when to make the tracks straight. It's very important, y'all. So each style is definitely different. To know which style that you're doing and how to lay your tracks, I would say go ahead and do some research. I will be doing some videos on how to lay your tracks for certain styles, so you guys can get more knowledge about different type of styles and how to sew it in. and all that good stuff. Y'all will be getting that soon. But also, to lay your tracks, you want to make sure that when you're sewing in your tracks, you want to make sure you're keeping a straight line. You don't want to sew crooked, y'all. It's very important to make sure you're sewing in a straight line. See, I'm experienced at this, so I know how to control the track. If you're not, you can definitely use some pins to hold down your track so that you will know exactly where you're sewing and how to get into a straight line. Because it's very, very important to have your tracks laying straight, because you don't want to have one higher than the other or have too much space in between the tracks. Also, that does depend on how many bundles you have, of how close you need to sew, and it depends on how full your client wants their wig. Most of my clients love their hair full, so I always use about 3 bundles. 3 bundles is the minimum that I will use on a wig, and it depends on your wealth. My wealth do come a bit thick, so I have a lot of hair in the welts. So some people, well, I have vendors that the higher inches it go, the smaller the weft gets, so you may need more bundles the longer the hair gets. So it really just depends on how much bundles you have, of how close you need to sew those tracks in. Also, the closure is very, very important. As I can see, I am not sewing on that closure. You want to make sure you sew right in front of the closure, like you're kind of like trying to connect them together. You don't want to sew on top of that closure. Again, please do not sew on top of the closure, because when you're getting ready to style that hair, it's going to be a difficult time trying to hide that track, or it's just going to have that hump where it's not going to lay down flat. So again, do not sew on the closure. It's very important. So that's pretty much all the tips that I have for right now for you guys when it comes to making a glueless wig. I do hope that this helps someone on their journey into becoming a glueless wig maker. But we're all done. Look how full this wig came out. But check out my next video. I will be styling it and pretty much installing it. So check out my new video so that you guys can see how the finished look came out. And again, this part right here in the on the wig in the middle, you definitely want to cut it out, because you want to have lace when you're installing it. You don't want to see the cap. And also, I have to dye these knots, so this definitely has to come off. But you guys, this is a wrap, and thank y'all so much for watching. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe, and catch y'all in my new video later. Mwah.
What I said right. I did it how I did it right. Yeah, cause I'm confident. I think I need an armor on me. Yeah, just me, no army with me. Stay blessed, got the Father with me. That's why your nose in my business, right? So damn nosy. All these bitches know.